Hello everybody. Yeah, I feel a little bit like an imposter because everything so far has been on public health. But as Jerry said, my background is in environmental and climate science. And I co-founded and directed the Center for Sustainable Solutions. And I think the more and more we get into these issues around sustainability, we're not just talking about environmental sustainability. And so I just wanted to set up the vision for the Center for Sustainable Solutions is to enable individuals, communities, and organizations to act toward a sustainable future. And being part of a university, we're doing that through education, research, and partnership. And I just wanted to point out our definition of sustainability here, because it's meeting the social foundations of the current and future generations while living responsibly within a healthy and natural environment. And so I think from the definition that we've come up with here, it's very clear that public health, that well-being are related to planetary health. And so what I'm going to be presenting here just is the background to how GALLANT came about, who we've partnered with, what we've learned, but then talk a little bit about the systems approach that we're taking within GALLANT, which is a NERC-funded research program. So back in 2020, one of the first partnerships that we formed was a really strong collaboration with Glasgow City Council. And we ran a series of green recovery dialogues, thinking about how do we go from COVID-19 to COP26 and now beyond. There were a number of measures that came in around COVID-19 that were meant to be temporary measures, but they were positive for the environment and the ecology, and they were positive for people as well. And so together, we brought together practitioners, policymakers, and researchers who had interests in some of these really strong challenge areas for Glasgow City Council, including implementing green futures, low carbon energy and housing, and rethinking consumption. And by bringing these people together in solution-focused dialogues, we got a really rich understanding of what the challenges were and what the urgent actions were needed in order to move forward. This is some of that rich information that's come out. There's a lot of text on here, so I'm not going to talk about this in any great detail, but what I want to say is we formed a number of great partnerships with the people who gave provocations, with the people that came together to look at the challenges from different perspectives. And some of the overarching themes that came out of all of the sessions were that environmental sustainability and social justice need to go hand in hand. The value of communities and working with communities to make spaces into places and make sure that we're valuing their diversity and allowing them to act as stewards is really important. And then the challenges around how do we align policy, planning, and decision-making, and in particular, how do we do that in a way that's driven by data and evidence. And I think part of what you heard this morning too, some of the challenges that we're facing is that that data or that evidence isn't always quantitative data. So within Glasgow, from the environmental side of things, the green assets within the city, things like Glasgow Green, things like the parks, even Kelvin Grove, are listed as negative assets on the city's books because they don't bring a direct economic value. So how do we get away from valuing things in that economic sense and start valuing more of the social and ecological things within the city? So we brought the outcomes of those green recovery dialogues to leaders around the city and the city region from both the public and the private sector. We had really good conversations with them, and they recognized these areas for urgent action, and they came up with other areas where we need to be working better and stronger, everything from having more consistency around education and training and skills, accelerating partnerships between public and private sector so that we can take solutions forward. There's a really big issue around climate finance. It's expected that the investment needed to reach the 2030 net zero carbon goals will cost £30 billion. And obviously the public sector doesn't have the finances to just do that themselves, so we need to have some creative solutions here. And finally, there needs to be a lot more collaboration at senior levels across across the city and the city region. So these are what the senior leaders had come out with. And I think for me, one of the key messages that came out of all of these conversations was that we need to be coming up with solutions that simultaneously solve for environment, health and well-being, inequalities, and the economy as well. And it's not an easy ask, but it frustrates me when you hear politicians talking about, well, we can't focus on climate change now because we have the cost of living crisis. These things are all linked, and I think if we think about them together, we can come up with benefits and solutions that co-benefit all of these different areas. So taking the learning that came out of those green recovery dialogues and that roundtable, there was an opportunity to apply for a NERC strategic program. And it was a call about changing the environment. It was a call where they were looking for different disciplines to come together and take a systems approach to help towards climate resilience and net zero. And so we came up with a handy acronym, GALLANT, because you need one of those to get big funding. But what we did was we brought together over 28 public and private sector partners, and we brought together 36 researchers across the University of Glasgow who come from all different research areas. So NERC is the Natural Environmental Research Council. And one of the things that you'll notice up here in the list of research expertise is that we also have people from economics, we have people from public policy, we have people from public health, all coming together to solve these challenges for the city. And in particular, we're taking a systems approach, and we want to look at where innovation and economic development are happening throughout the city and make sure that they're being considered through social and ecological lenses. And we're working quite closely and across a number of the different departments within the City Council as well. So the model that we've decided to use for understanding the city as a system is donut economics. By show of hands, how many people are familiar? About half. So that's the circle that you see over on the left here. It's a green circle, it looks like a donut. And what we want to do is bring everybody into that green space, which is considered the safe and just space for humanity, or that's where people thrive. So we want to make sure that everybody is meeting their social foundations within the city, everything from housing, gender equality, energy, food. But we don't want to do that at the expense of the ecological ceiling. So we don't want to overshoot the 1.5 degree temperature targets of planetary health. You can see ocean acidification and some of the other components there as well. And so what we're doing is we're using that as our system. We're working quite closely with the open space strategy. We're looking at the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation to understand where the 5 work packages that we're bringing together can have the most impact. And we have a work stream running throughout the 5 years of the program that's sole purpose is to look at community collaboration and how we develop those relationships that aren't extractive relationships, but actually benefit the communities from the work that we're doing. So the images you see here, one of them is from Scotland, the other one is from China, but the 5 work package areas we're working in are creating climate resilient urban riverscapes. And so that's hopefully coming up with something like the image that we have here on the right. That's one from China. But you can see that if you have integrated solutions where people can interact with urban riverscapes, you can also think about other sorts of co-benefits. So you can think about people being outdoors and engaging with nature. You can think about biodiversity. And these also have flood benefits as well because they can take on water when flooding happens. In our second work package, we're looking at connecting up urban habitats for nature and increasing biodiversity throughout the city. Our third work package is looking at regenerating vacant and derelict land. This is from an engineering approach where you can actually sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and lock away contaminants in vacant sites as well. The fourth work package is looking at both the infrastructural and the social barriers to people taking up active travel throughout the city, especially for journeys that are less than 5 kilometers. And in the fifth work package, we're looking at clean energy at the community scale. So our researchers are involved in some of the really big projects that are happening throughout the city, but in particular, these are looking at community scale solutions to energy. And part of the systems approach is we're all learning from each other as we go along and learning from the communities. And so, for instance, what we see is if the community collaboration indicates that there's a community that's lacking in access to healthy food, for example, how do we regenerate vacant and derelict land within their community, have clean energy solutions that could power, a greenhouse or something like that to serve as a community food hub. So we're looking at how do we integrate solutions to the various challenges that exist throughout the city. So the donut works as a really nice framework to be able to, you can unroll it, and what you can see towards the bottom of the screen here is if you unroll it, you have 4 quadrants where you have the ecological ceiling at the top, you have the social foundation at the bottom, and it allows you to look at issues both locally and the impacts that your projects are having globally. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. This is an example of the 4 quadrants. So on the left, you have the ecological local space and the social local space. On the right, you have the ecological global space and the social global space. So those are the kinds of questions that we ask. And just because we're here as part of a public health seminar, is in the local social lens, we might ask, how can all of the people of Glasgow thrive? And we ask that in the context of the community or with the group of people that we're going into. What would thriving look like for you? And we ask a lot of questions and do a lot of interactive workshops to try and understand and tease apart both what the future could look like and what they want it to look like and what are the challenges. Part of what comes out of this as well, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, is we start being able to understand the different components of the social foundations in a lot more detail. We've already done a lot of desk-based research to tie each of these components to what the policies currently regulate for. What does the city have as targets? So for example, here we have a target within the city to narrow the gap in health life expectancy for both men and women by 2028. And we're also taking snapshots and sharing that with our groups. So you can see that the snapshot indicator for the greater Glasgow area in terms of health life expectancy is 56 years for men and 57.4 years for women. And we'd be looking at obviously reducing these gaps over time, but this is where we are at now. And so it allows you to look at these over time and understand how they're changing. These are what the workshops look like. So lots of in-person activity, lots of post-it notes, lots of different people coming together. So we've done this now with the people that work within Glasgow City Council and the newly elected officials this year. And we will be rolling this out to stakeholders and communities in the new year. And what I want to get across, what we're doing and taking that donut further, which nobody else has done yet, is by having these workshops with so many different people, we can understand from many different vantage points what their perspectives are about these ecological components and these social components. When we talk to more and more people, we can start to understand how these different parts of the system are connected. And our systems scientists within this program of work have the means to create these formal feedback systems and understand these loops within the process so that we can come up with decision support making tools that are based on our understanding of the system. So over the 5 years of the program, each of the work packages have their own timelines and their targets for what they're trying to achieve. But one of the things that we're doing a lot of is this is a place-based approach. We're making sure that we're keeping track of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And ultimately what we want to be able to do is share our methods and our tools and our evidence and our solutions with other cities so that our scaling up looks like sharing the lessons that we've learned so people can do this in other places as well. And so there's a number of different partners associated with the program. We're working quite closely at this stage with C40 Cities, which connects to a lot of the mega cities across the world. They have a Green Economy and Innovation Forum. So we've already shared what we're doing with our donut with a number of other cities like Amsterdam, which is one of the first ones to pilot donut economics. And so this is really helpful. The UNECE is really interested in our energy outcomes. So they've agreed to host a meeting for us when we have outcomes in Geneva. And we have a number of companies who are also interested, and partners who are also interested in the future of work and skills development. So we're working quite closely with Ramble, Star, Corn Ferry, and others as well, Skills Development Scotland, to look at, as decarbonization, as different kinds of solutions come forward, where are the skills gaps that need to be provisioned. And then we're also working with private companies like Deloitte to understand if the donut economics system goes forward and starts being used in decision-making, where are the accelerators and where are the barriers for the private sector to get involved in these sorts of ventures moving forward. From my perspective in leading this project, I'm really excited that we've been able to include about 20% or 19% of our co-investigators, our early career researchers. We're bringing in 14 new postdoctoral research associates and 10 PhD students funded in this program. And one of the really nice things about this is we are all working in a way that's very different from how we normally work. We're coming out of our silos. We are not just saying that we're doing interdisciplinary, we're really challenging each other to work across disciplines. And we're also really thinking about that systems approach and how do we make sure that we're working in a whole systems way. So what success looks like is that we actually do make those policy connections. We understand where the policy challenges are. We've seen quite a few of those coming out of the workshops that we've run already. And so we want to be able to influence those not only at the local level, but understand where the conflicts arise with Scottish policy or with UK government policy as well. We want to find ways, creative ways of sustaining funding to the kinds of projects that we're doing beyond just the 5 years of the program that we've been awarded. I won't go through all of these, but ultimately we want to be able to increase capacity and understand how we bring people across sectors and across disciplines together to actually create solutions that have co-benefits across the environment, the social, and the economic domains. And I will leave it there.